It's strange how a single sentence can shatter your entire world. That night wasn't supposed to be anything special. It was just a quiet evening at home, the kind I used to love. The fireplace was humming softly, the smell of jasmine tea filling the air. Claire was upstairs on a call with her mom, her voice gentle and familiar. I didn't mean to listen, I really didn't. But then I heard my name. I'd gone upstairs to grab my jacket, and as I passed the study, I caught the sound of her laughter. It wasn't her usual laugh. It was lighter, sharper, almost nervous. Then she said it. "I know, Mom. I'm just waiting for the inheritance. Once everything's official, I'll figure out what to do next." I stopped breathing. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misheard. Maybe she was joking. Maybe inheritance meant something else. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out her words. Her mother's voice came faintly through the phone, muffled, but clear enough to catch the tone. Approval, not shock. Claire kept talking, oblivious to the fact that I was just outside the door, frozen in place. No, he has no idea. He's kind, but naive. I'll make it look like I care. Just a few more months, Mom. The words sliced through me, slow and cold. I backed away quietly, step by step, until I was back downstairs. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there in the living room, staring at the fire, trying to understand what had just happened. For 3 years, I'd loved her. We met at a charity gala. She was radiant, disarming, kind. Or at least I thought she was. We built a life together, brick by brick, late-night talks, small vacations, plans for the future. And now, I was hearing that to her, I was just a placeholder. A stepping stone to money. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. The pain was too heavy for that. It sat deep in my chest, solid and silent. When she came downstairs a few minutes later, she was smiling, carrying her phone in one hand and a mug in the other. She looked like the woman I loved, but I couldn't unhear the truth anymore. "Hey," she said cheerfully, curling up beside me. "You okay? You look lost in thought." I forced a small smile. "Just tired," I said. "Long day." She kissed my cheek, completely unaware that I now knew everything. "Don't stay up too late," she said softly, and went to bed. I sat there for a long time, staring at the fire until it burned itself down to embers. Every memory we'd built replayed in my head like scenes from a film I suddenly didn't believe in. Her laughter, her affection, her promises, all of it hollow now. Around midnight, I finally stood up, walked to my study, and turned on the desk lamp. The soft glow illuminated a single stack of papers. My will. My father's lawyer had drawn it up last year after my parents passed away, leaving me their estate. Everything I owned was listed there. The house, the accounts, the shares in the company, and Claire's name was all over it. I sat there for a long time, staring at the ink, the legal lines, the neat little boxes of my life. Then, I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and sent a quiet email to my lawyer. "I need to make some urgent revisions to my will, confidentially. Please prepare a meeting for tomorrow morning." Then I turned off the light. Upstairs, I could hear her breathing softly in her sleep. Peaceful, comfortable, dreaming maybe of the future she thought she'd bought. I lay down beside her, but I didn't sleep. My mind was too busy stitching together the pieces of what had just broken. I realized something that night. Betrayal doesn't always scream. It sometimes whispers in familiar voices. Sometimes it wears the face you love most. And sometimes the smartest thing you can do isn't to confront the liar. It's to let them keep believing the lie, just long enough to rewrite the ending. The next morning, the sunlight felt colder than usual. It poured through the curtains, bright and careless, as if it didn't know what had happened the night before. Claire was in the kitchen, humming softly while making breakfast. She looked so ordinary, so at ease. Her hair was tied back, her smile effortless, her voice warm. If I hadn't known what she'd said, I might have kissed her right there. Instead, I watched her from across the room and said, "I have a few errands this morning. Don't wait up for me." "Everything okay?" she asked, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "Yeah, just some paperwork for the company," I replied. She handed me my cup, brushing her fingers lightly against mine. "Don't work too hard," she teased. I smiled faintly. "I won't." I left the house quietly, the mask of normalcy fixed in place. Inside, though, I felt like a man walking through a dream. The world hadn't changed. Cars still honked, people still hurried to work, but everything looked different now. Every smile, every voice, every promise felt like something I needed to test before believing. When I reached my lawyer's office, he greeted me with the same polite warmth he always had. "Morning, Mr. Langford," he said. "Got your message. Everything all right?" I nodded, sitting down across from him. "I just need to make some changes to my will," quietly. He adjusted his glasses. "Of course. Any specific updates?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to remove one beneficiary and add a few new ones." He raised an eyebrow. "Understood. May I ask, who's being removed?" "My fiancée," I said evenly. He hesitated for a moment, studying my face. "I see. Should I ask why?" I shook my head. "No, just make sure it's done today, and please keep this strictly confidential." "Of course," he said softly. "I'll handle it personally." For the next hour, we went through the documents line by line. I revised every detail, transferring my estate, assets, and company shares into a trust that would activate upon my death, with most of it directed toward my godson and several charitable foundations my parents had supported. Claire's name was erased completely, not out of spite, but clarity. By the time I signed the new paperwork, something inside me felt lighter. Not happy, just settled. The truth had stripped away the illusion I'd been living in. I wasn't hers anymore. I never really had been. When I left the office, my lawyer stopped me. "If I may, sir," he said, "I've known you a long time. You seem different." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I just learned something important." "And what's that?" "That love without honesty is just performance. And I'm done paying for tickets to that show."
Nodded slowly. Understood. That afternoon, I went about my day as if nothing had changed. I returned home, helped Claire in the garden, even listened as she talked about our future plans. Every word she said sounded like lines from a script I already knew the ending to. In the evenings, she'd sit beside me, resting her head on my shoulder, scrolling through honeymoon destinations. "What do you think about Santorini?" she'd ask. "It's beautiful," I'd reply softly. "You'd love it." She smiled, thinking she'd won. But beneath that calm, I was already rebuilding my life in silence, separating our finances, rerouting accounts, updating documents, preparing for the quiet departure I knew was coming. I started keeping small notes, reminders of her lies, dates, phrases, receipts, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted truth. Proof that I hadn't imagined it all. Every night after she fell asleep, I'd lie there beside her, staring at the ceiling. The moonlight would wash across her face, soft and innocent, but I couldn't unsee the deception anymore. Sometimes I'd wonder how long she'd been pretending. Did she ever care at all? Or was it always about the inheritance? The house? The money? The name? The hardest part wasn't losing her love. It was realizing it had never really existed. About a week later, she started talking about wedding venues again, completely unaware that the foundation beneath her fantasy had already vanished. "I found this beautiful estate in Vermont," she said one evening. "It's a little pricey, but with your inheritance, it's nothing we can't handle." I looked at her and smiled, slow and quiet. "You're right. With my inheritance, everything's possible." She laughed softly, mistaking my calm for affection. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's the moment you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop needing them to see your worth because you finally know it yourself. That night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I looked at her one last time with the same softness I used to feel, only now it was empty. I whispered, "Enjoy the dream while it lasts," because soon she'd wake up and everything she thought was hers would be gone. A few weeks passed, and from the outside, nothing seemed different. We still went to dinners with friends, still took weekend drives, still looked like the perfect couple. If anything, Claire seemed happier. She laughed more, touched my arm more often, called me pet names again. But I could see it in her eyes, the calculation behind every smile. She wasn't loving me. She was managing an investment. I played my part, careful and calm. The hardest part of betrayal isn't the pain, it's pretending you don't know. And I became an expert at that. One morning, I told her I'd be away for a few days to meet investors for a new business deal. She kissed me goodbye at the door, told me she'd miss me, and reminded me to take care of myself. It almost sounded real. As soon as I left the house, I didn't go to any meeting. I drove to my family's lake cabin instead, the place my father built decades ago, away from the noise of the world. It was quiet there, clean, honest. I needed that silence to think. Sitting on the old wooden porch, I went through every piece of my life with Claire, one memory at a time, trying to find the exact moment when it all turned into an illusion. There was no single day, no sudden switch, just a slow fade from genuine affection to something colder, hungrier. People always talk about heartbreak as if it's dramatic, shouting, crying, chaos. But mine wasn't. It was peaceful, like watching a sunset you know will never rise again. That night I made a decision. I wouldn't expose her. I wouldn't humiliate her. I wouldn't even confront her. I'd let her walk right into the emptiness she built for herself. When I came home 3 days later, she was waiting at the door, smiling like nothing had changed. "Hey, stranger," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "How was your trip?" "Good," I said, hugging her back. "Productive." She kissed me, her lips soft and practiced. "Missed you." "I missed you too," I said quietly. And for a moment, I almost believed it. That night, we had dinner by candlelight. Her idea. She poured wine, talked about our future, about how excited she was for our wedding next spring. I nodded, listening, occasionally smiling. Inside, though, I felt miles away. When she went upstairs to take a call, I stayed behind and glanced at her phone on the table. It was buzzing softly, messages lighting up the screen. I shouldn't have looked, but something inside me pushed me to. It was a message from her friend, Jenna. "He still doesn't know. You're unbelievable." Claire had replied, "Nope, he's totally clueless. One more month and I'm set." I didn't feel angry anymore, just empty. I put the phone down, careful to leave no trace, and sat there for a long time in silence.
I realized I didn't even recognize the woman upstairs anymore. The person I'd proposed to, the person I'd imagined a family with, she wasn't real. Later that night, as she slept beside me, I quietly packed a small bag. Just essentials: clothes, documents, keys. I wasn't leaving for good yet, but I wanted to be ready. I'd already changed the will, already transferred the assets, already set everything in motion. All that was left was time. In the following days, I began creating space. I stopped talking about the future, stopped making plans, stopped reacting to her little manipulations. I became quiet. She noticed. One evening she asked, "You've been distant lately. Is something wrong?" I smiled softly. "No, just thinking about things." "About us?" she asked. "About life," I said. "About what really matters." She tilted her head, a hint of worry flashing in her eyes. "You're not having second thoughts, are you?" By the time autumn arrived, the cracks had started to show. Claire was growing restless. She'd begun talking more about next steps, asking about timelines, about when I'd finalize a few financial things before the wedding. She masked it all under sweet tones and gentle smiles, but I could hear the edge in her voice, the impatience. One evening, she poured herself a glass of wine and said, "I was thinking maybe we should just go ahead and set a date. Make it official. Your family estate would be perfect for the ceremony." I looked up from my book and smiled faintly. "You really want to get married there?" "Of course," she said quickly. "It's beautiful, and it's sentimental." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is." That estate, my father's old property, had already been transferred into the charitable trust. She didn't know it yet, but her dream venue wasn't even mine to give anymore. She took another sip of wine. "You've been so quiet lately," she said softly. "It's like you're far away from me." "I'm not far. I'm just thinking about the future." Her lips curved into a practiced smile. "Our future, I hope." "Of course," I said. And even though the words came out steady, I felt the ache in my chest, because once I had meant them. That night, after she went to bed, I stood in the hallway staring at our framed engagement photo, the two of us smiling against a sunset backdrop. Everyone had said we looked perfect together, but now all I saw was a man who didn't yet know he was standing next to a stranger. The next morning, she came into my study, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. "Hey, I noticed you've been meeting with your lawyer a lot lately. Is everything okay?" I didn't even flinch. "Just estate paperwork, routine stuff." She leaned against the doorway, pretending not to care. "You're not changing anything, are you?" I met her gaze calmly. "Why would I?" She smiled a little too quickly. "Right, I was just curious." After she left, I sat there for a long while, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. She was starting to suspect. The performance was cracking. That evening, I received an email from my lawyer confirming that all legal transitions were finalized. The revised will, the trust, the asset transfers, everything was official. There was no going back. A few days later, Claire suggested we visit my family estate to plan wedding details. I agreed. It was perfect, the setting where everything had begun and where it would end. When we arrived, the air smelled like pine and old memories. The leaves were turning gold, and the lake shimmered in the distance. Claire walked ahead, excitement in her step, pointing out where she wanted the altar, the tents, the photos. "This will be the perfect spot," she said, spinning slowly with her arms outstretched. "I can already picture it." I smiled faintly. "It's a beautiful dream." She turned to me. "It's not a dream, Alex. It's real. Our life. Our future." Her words should have hurt, but they didn't. I was past that now. Wound had already scarred. That night, we stayed at the estate. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch, watching the moon reflect over the still water, thinking about my parents. My father used to say, "Character shows in the quiet moments. Not when life is easy, but when it breaks." He'd been right. The next morning, I received a call from Daniel, my lawyer's associate. He confirmed everything was completed and legally airtight. "You're officially done, Alex," he said. "No one can touch what's yours now." "Thank you," I said quietly. Claire came downstairs in a robe, coffee in hand, smiling like she had the world figured out. "Who was that?" "Just work," I said. "Good news?" "The best kind," I replied. She grinned and walked over to kiss me, her lips warm and familiar. "I'm so glad things are finally settling down. Soon we'll have everything we dreamed of." I looked into her eyes, the same eyes that once made me believe in forever, and said yes. Soon everything will be exactly as it should be. Over the next few days, I let her keep dreaming. I let her browse honeymoon destinations, talk about future homes, even call caterers. Every plan she made was built on foundations that no longer existed. And then, one evening, she brought up something that sealed her fate. "By the way," she said casually, "my mom mentioned that maybe we should combine finances before the wedding. Joint accounts, just to make things easier later." I looked at her quietly. "That's a big step." She nodded, brushing my arm. "It's just practical. We're about to be one family anyway." I smiled slowly. "You're right. Let's discuss it soon." She seemed satisfied with that answer, completely unaware that I'd already closed and consolidated every account in my name. That night I stood by the window as she slept, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing. It was strange. I didn't feel hate. I didn't feel anger. Just an odd kind of peace. Because when someone shows you what they truly value, they also show you who they truly are. The next morning, I booked a quiet appointment with my bank and instructed them to finalize one last detail: the trust distribution letter that would activate upon my marriage or death. Either way, it ensured she got nothing. By then, everything was ready. All that remained was time. She kept planning her fairy tale, decorating the illusion she'd built, while I watched silently from within it, waiting for the right moment to let it crumble. I wasn't rushing. Revenge didn't need to be loud or fast. It just needed to be perfect.